I think in order to build a successful advocacy program, you have to fail first, which is exactly what I did when I was trying to build this at IBM. The idea was we needed a tool. We socialized it, went on sort of this roadshow, getting folks excited. We crafted all of the content for people to share, created all of the assets so it would be just a seamless process for them to share. Well, guess what? No one used it. We put all of this effort into creating this content and bringing on this tool, and it fell flat because there was nothing in it for the employees. So that was sort of the aha moment to me. Was like, oh, so maybe a tool isn't the right way for this. So when I was asked, like, how do we do this successfully? And my thought was, we can't bring in a tool. We need to actually build a culture of sharing that starts up at the top. So folks see executives sharing and they see other colleagues having success, and they actually want to join in on that. Our first time that we did this sort of like social blitz where we enabled a team to share about their product launch and sort of how they got to this product and how long had they been working on it, those individual posts performed 4 times better than our actual brand handle posts. So that the performance literally has spoken for itself.
Hi, I am Andrew Seal, and welcome to my podcast, How to Run a Happy Employee Advocacy Pilot. This podcast explores the best way for organisations to launch and sustain successful employee advocacy programmes. Now, building employee advocacy is often described as a complex and difficult task, and while there are many moving parts to coordinate, at its heart is a simple framework which puts employees at the centre. Now, this is what I define as happy employee advocacy. A programme which delivers results for the business by focusing first on what's in it for them. Now, I'm delighted to welcome Kalee Williams as my guest today. Now, Kalee is Head of Social Strategy at Atlassian, and she has significant experience on social media, having previously worked at IBM as Global Social Lead. Now, Kalee now handles social media at Atlassian, including building their creator programme, creating numerous playbooks to enable Atlassians to share, and partnering with their comms team to help their executives grow their presence on LinkedIn. Now, Kalee, I was introduced to you by Ashley Faust, who is a major thought leader over at Atlassian. Thanks, Ashley, for that. Welcome to the show, Kalee. Fantastic to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. I'm super excited to be here. This is an area that I'm really passionate about and I'm actively working in daily.
I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say. So today we're going to be talking about how to inspire employees to write in their own voice. I think this is going to be a great episode. So as I said, Kalee, so you currently run social media marketing programs working with employees at Atlassian. Now, in my experience, not all employee advocacy programs are the same. There are different types of approach within different companies. So, for example, some only allow employees to share pre-approved brand content. Now, others allow employees to create content in their own voice, but with a mix of sharing brand content too. And then some have employee creator programs, but the content is shared only by the brand channels. And then others completely free up their employees to share as they wish. Now, I understand you've tested many of these different techniques over the years to make sharing easier for employees, from ghostwriting to creating brand assets. So I'd love to hear more about that. But firstly, could you give me your definition of employee advocacy and then perhaps talk through what you've tried in terms of encouraging employees to share on social media?
Yeah, when I think of employee advocacy, I think of it when an employee that is acting as a spokesperson for a brand or a company. This is a role that is usually taken by someone internally at the company. As marketers, I think a lot of times we think that this role should be played by marketers because we're so good at selling things and putting a pretty bow around it. But actually, I feel like the best advocates always tend to be the folks who are working behind the scenes, the ones who are shipping products, building things, impacting the roadmaps are really the ones that's sort of that where that sweet spot is, and the ones who have the best stories to share. Yeah, I've built advocacy programs twice in my career so far, and I'm probably not done yet because it keeps changing. But I think in order to build a successful advocacy program, you have to fail first, which is exactly what I did when I was trying to build this at IBM. I was working with a small cohort. We were like acting as a tiger team, trying to set up our advocacy program before our large branded conference called Think. The idea was we needed a tool. So we did all of this market research on the best advocacy tool. There's a number of them out in the industry. We socialized it, went on sort of this road show, getting folks excited. We crafted all of the content for people to share, created all of the assets so it would be just a seamless process for them to share. Well, guess what? No one used it. We put all of this effort into creating this content and bringing on this tool, and it fell flat because there was nothing in it for the employees. And the process was so clunky for them to connect their LinkedIn or personal account on their platform of choice, upload the content, draft it, and then publish it, where they were like, we just want to be able to do this from our desktop or our mobile device in our own time. So that was sort of the aha moment to me, was like, oh, so we maybe a tool isn't the right way for this. And so I started thinking about it. And then also we are asking these employees to take personal time to share with their audience, as well as spam their audience with all this marketing jargon and fluff that we had drafted for them, which is actually really hurting their audience at the end of the day, because they've built these credible personal brands, they have a trusted audience, and a lot of times their audience is family and friends as well. So they already have a professional and personal relationship with these folks. So it feels really unnatural to be spamming them with all of this event content and webinar and company announcements, and not letting them sort of share their own expertise. I also have realized things that didn't work is we sort of went for like, let's reach the masses with this type of approach, instead of starting small with folks who are really interested, or they are very focused on building a personal brand across social platforms, which was also something else I took away when that first advocacy program failed at IBM. So since then, I've been at Atlassian for 2.5 years. As soon as I started, employee advocacy was back on my plate. It was a hot topic once again. I think that with LinkedIn monthly active users continuing to increase month over month, and that platform, I feel like it's just only getting started again. And it's a really exciting time to be on the platform. So everyone is focused on, how do we build an advocacy program? How do we get our audience sharing more? It feels like LinkedIn is almost like the water cooler these days, where people are sharing like what they did over the weekend, as well as like events, and also like things that they learned like in a brown bag style. So when I was asked, like, how do we do this successfully? And my thought was, we can't bring in a tool. We need to actually build a culture of sharing that starts up at the top. So folks see executives sharing, and they see other colleagues having success, and they actually want to join in on that. And that's exactly what we did. We opened up, or we brought in an expert. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Richard Vanderblom, but he's a LinkedIn expert.
Yeah.
We actually brought him in for an internal inspiration session. So he came in, talked about personal branding, the success that folks are seeing on the LinkedIn platform, and why it's important, especially if you aren't working at a company and maybe you're job searching. You want to have a personal brand out there so you can stand out, as well as just always continuing to grow your network. So we started with that. Also during that time, we started activating our executives, because I really was focused on building that culture of sharing and starting up at the top. So once again, not having our executives spam their audiences, but being really intentional when we wanted to activate their handles, and also let them write this in their own voice and tone, which was super important, because our founders at our company, they're very influential, like any founder, and they already have established their own brand. So we really wanted to make sure that we were playing into that. And then from there, I had some team leads reach out to me, which I thought was super important to have teams doing this together instead of folks doing it individually. So a couple teams reached out to me. They're like, we're really interested in starting to showcase like our team culture and the milestones that our team is achieving together. And I was like, oh, perfect. This is exactly what we've been looking for. If you're okay with me helping you guys ghostwrite the content to show you like how I would write this, I shared prompts. I gave some folks some drafted copy who were struggling, And then pretty much we were off to the races, and the performance spoke for themselves. Our first time that we did this sort of like social blitz where we enabled a team to share about their product launch and sort of how they got to this product and how long had they been working on it, those individual posts performed 4 times better than our actual brand handle posts. So that the performance literally has spoken for itself. Obviously, there's so many product announcements and different features rolling out. We don't do this type of sharing or like sort of all hands on deck type of approach for everyone. But for the bigger ones, I'm super connected to those teams. But since those teams are already in the rhythm of sharing, I do see them actually sharing on their own, and they're sharing small wins, or a lot of event content is always super popular because I think people feel really comfortable sharing that content because there's a lot of other colleagues sharing content around that time too.
Wow, I mean that's really impressive, and I love the point you made at the beginning about you almost have to fail in order to know how to do it well. So my understanding is really, so you decided once you were in Atlassian and you had this opportunity to essentially try again, you started at the top, and that was the most important thing. You started with the leadership and the founder to really get them to inspire others, and then from that you had team leads coming in, as you said, and wanting to do it and starting to create content where you were then able to help them do that. I mean, that's really quite impressive. So, what's your view on what a successful employee advocacy program looks like from a content point of view? You know,
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
no. So I was just going to say, if you think about it from the point of view of what's most likely to influence, the audience, that's going to achieve what the business wants. What kind of content do you think needs to be shared by employees?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of content, and I think it also does vary by the role. So when I look at content for companies, I feel like there's always like 5 pillars that usually make up the content mix. You have sort of the view into the role, into someone's role or experience or expertise. You have the moments that they're proud of, whether it's a promotion or a product that launch they've been working on for months, or a campaign that they're excited to finally launch out in the wild. You have company messages and promotion. So maybe there's a new acquisition that the company wants to share and this employee is really excited about it. They might want to share that, or there's a new executive, say a new COO is coming on board. You might want to share that because they're really inspired by that person. Then there's like the thought leadership piece. So sharing of expertise, and an area that this person's really passionate about. And then also there's product knowledge. So I think there's those 5 pillars that usually make up a successful advocacy program. But everyone's content mix is different because someone in marketing might not be sharing all of the deep product knowledge on a specific product. And someone in HR, they might want to focus more on the behind the scenes culture that they really enjoy, that they're actually using for like talent brand and acquisition. And then founders and executives, their content mix is probably heavily going to be thought leader content and more of those company announcements. So that's sort of how I see it when I'm working with folks and helping them map out their content and thinking about the content that we need to be successful.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're saying clearly there that while there's these 5 pillars, it varies by role and people in different roles. So taking the same topic or subject or message will have completely
Mhm.
different, or
Yep.
may have completely different perspectives and views on that content. And you're saying that's important to come across, like that should come across.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to why a lot of sometimes tools don't work because we have tried to and I think a tool is great for a lot of things, but I think for like creating that authentic message and content that you want to see from your network on LinkedIn and their personal experience that can't come through when someone else is writing the copy and pasting it into the tool for someone to share. So I think that's the piece that we've tried to sort of over engineer and just like automate. And I think that everyone has experiences to share. And the ghostwriter sometimes doesn't know what those are, or the tool, because we actually need to hear it from the person themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what when you decided that employee advocacy or essentially employee creators and a thought leadership approach was a thing you wanted to do at Atlassian. What challenges had arisen in the company that made you decide this was the right solution to communicating with your customers and audience?
Yeah, I love this question because I feel like the company probably hasn't fully recovered from this incident, even though it was almost 2.5 or 2 years ago. It happened 6 months into my role at Atlassian. One of our core products had an incident that lasted for about 6 to 8 weeks, and it impacted a lot of our customers and
Okay.
actually created a lot of negative messages and conversations across our social channels. So it was really a all hands on situation for a lot of our employees. So we actually had to enable the inbound messages were through the roof, and our social care team was having some challenges trying to manage all of those and responding timely. So we brought in a lot of our executives, our founders, some of our employees, and we actually enabled them to respond from their personal handles to help lighten the mood on the platforms, let our customers know that we hear you. We're trying to get this resolved as soon as possible. Just trust us on this. Because in those types of situations, you actually want to hear from a person
Mm.
because naturally you just trust them instead of it just coming from a brand handle where you don't know the person who's behind the handle. I personally know the people who are behind our handles, and they're fantastic and they're a joy to work with. But as a consumer, you have no idea who you're talking to. It might be a bot at the end of the day that you're like, do they really understand what I'm going through? So that's when the light bulb moment I think went off for our organization was like, we need an always on employee advocacy program. So in these types of moments or crisis, we can actually enable our employees to go out and be spokespeople for us to really help elevate the brand during those times. So that's was what happened. I think obviously you learn from every type of failure, like I said earlier. And I think this moment was a huge learning opportunity for the company and also has been a great way to sort of springboard our socials and how we approach social care, how we approach advocacy, and just sort of the whole ecosystem.
I think that's a great example of, because people often talk about people buy from people and things like that, but actually, when you're talking about the actual care side of things, the customer care side of things, that's almost more important, isn't it? As you say, you do want to connect with people, you do want to know that someone's actually listening to you and things are actually happening, and that it's not a bot or whatever it might be. So I think that's an amazing example. And it's fascinating to see that's what really created that step change in the business to actually to grow this. So no, thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
Now, people often say to me that one of the biggest challenges is how to get employees to share in their own voice. People run employee advocacy programs, but they can't necessarily get this step change to actually get employees to talk in their own voice. What do you think holds employees back from this, and how have you tackled it?
I think there's a few things. Folks don't know where to start, and a lot of folks don't have a lot of confidence in what they should be sharing, and are like, do people actually really want to hear from me? It's a really vulnerable place to be in the beginning because you're not sure how your audience is going to respond to some of your perspectives, and you really have to be brave when you want to put yourself out there. And making content requires so much time, which I know everyone is short on time these days. So it's really a combination of all of those that I feel like is what's holding people back. But once you start to peel back the layers and someone sees a lot of success with content, or they're seeing an increase in their followers, or their network is really exploding, I think folks, that's when they're like, oh, there's something there and people actually care. To help my employee advocates along this journey, for folks who, and usually someone slacks me like, hey, I want to get started. I don't know where to start. What should I do? I'm like, let's grab time, set up an hour with me. I like to have like a discovery session, more of a conversation with these individuals to understand, what do you like to talk about? Like, it just doesn't have to be work related. Like, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? Do you have a family? What do you like to do with them? Because there's a lot of similarities and overlap between what we like to do at work a lot and also what we like to do with our personal time. And that's where I've sort of like been able to find these like hidden gems with folks, where some folks might be like, all of my vehicles are black. And I'm like, oh, that's actually really interesting. And how they configure everything on their desk is in dark mode, and everything, all the clothes, shirts that they buy are black. And I'm like, that's actually really cool. There's something there. And I've seen folks be like, oh, and they've created content around that of like their own personal branding, or like what they like to do on the weekends, or someone enjoys driving their motorcycle around the coast and how they drove that vehicle to all of their developer events one year. I'm like, that's a really cool story that someone might find interesting on LinkedIn. And then figuring out like, how do we weave it into thought leadership or into product launches, or how they approach teamwork. And so I creating content is such a creative process that you sort of like have to do some type of discovery and like rapid ideation session to get someone really thinking about the content that they could create. And then also, I know content can be such a like overbearing, like crazy process to have to hurdle at times. So to get folks started, I love Canva, and I will create templates for them. I also will create some templates in Keynote that are really easy to just add copy to, drop in images, so they start to get comfortable and can get into that rhythm of creating content. That's where I like to start in the beginning. If anyone needs help with ghostwriting, I always offer that. But I feel like folks see more success when I share prompts. So I'll
Okay.
give them like a month of prompts and be like, this is what these are just thought starters. Feel free to use these or to finesse them as you see fit to your own content. And then after a month of sharing, let's assess and see like what's working and do rinse and repeat, and then try some stuff, maybe test something else out. Social is just such a playground for testing that
Mm.
I always try to encourage everyone that just because something flops on social doesn't mean that it was a failure. Like, what are you learning from it? Are you learning that it's too many characters? You had a link in there. Maybe that should go in the comments. Maybe you need more images or video content. So that's sort of how I get folks just to start thinking like out of their daily routine of their everyday work and thinking about like, how does social actually work, so they can start to feel like they're part of the community and are more comfortable sharing.
I love that perspective. I love the fact that you kind of sit with them and try and explore and find those kind of unearth those stories in their life. You know, like you're saying about going on the bike or wearing black, whatever it might be, and how they can apply that. I think that's fantastic. So after that, and do you normally work on a kind of one-to-one level with key team members to support them? That's what you're normally doing, is it?
Yeah, it's definitely a hands-on approach in the very beginning. And then after about 6 months, everyone is it's a self-serve. It turns into pretty much a self-serve model. I will have some individuals like sending me links like, hey, can you amplify this from the brand handle, which is something we always do, especially in the beginning to help really boost impressions, or
Mm.
for us to add a comment. If we really want to boost a piece of content, I will share it in a couple of different Slack channels and ask other teams to engage with it just to get the ball
Yeah.
rolling. But yeah, social is such a personal space because you're sharing your life with the world.
Mm.
So that's also like one thing that I really try to make sure that whatever piece of content someone is sharing, that they're really tapping into that emotion, because that's really what you're trying to deliver on and connect on a platform. So someone wants to continue reading your stories or viewing your videos. So that's the one piece I feel like a lot of times we think of advocacy programs. A lot of teams forget about the emotional part of social. And that's why where a lot of times automated content just doesn't work.
I think you actually hit the nail on the head there. I think it's the emotional side, it's the human side, isn't it? That's what actually connects people to the content, isn't it? If it's when you see these posts which are, quite obviously reposting kind of brand or corporate written content, you just your eyes glaze over, don't they? And you just think you just shared something you don't even care about or know about.
Yeah. Yeah, you see them all the time. I feel like they're really big around like event season. Not gonna lie, they always like give me I'm like, ugh, why do you have to share that? Like, can't you just share that in your own voice? Especially when you see an entire company having all of their employees share the same piece of content, and you're like, oh gosh, this I'm like, get this out of my feed. I don't want to view this right now.
If employees are sharing in their own voices, how do you coordinate and monitor the program to ensure that the content they're sharing or creating is meeting the wider business needs?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a couple things. It's social being baked into the culture at a company. And from day one that someone joins the company, there is some type of social onboarding about like what we want you to share on social, encouraging someone to share. Like you started your first day at this new role, please share this on social. Share the like cool swag box that you got that you received with your favorite items, or share a picture of your setup at home if you're work from home or if you're working from an office. Like just making sure that like that is baked into the culture is so important from day one, as well as having brand guidelines for an employee. And so when I say brand guidelines, especially for social, I don't want someone to think that they have to pick those up and replicate them on their own personal brand, because that is not what I want. I just want to make sure that they know this is sort of who we are and how we like to talk to our customers. Try to apply this to your own channels, but also view it with like through a lens, because I do want someone to have their own personal brand. I don't want them to be picking up our same brand, but making sure that someone has those is, I think, super important. So you don't have someone going rogue on social and then it becomes an entire crisis for a team to have to manage. I am very grateful that I've never experienced that in my roles. I do know I witness it from the sidelines and have seen other brands, especially in the last couple of years, where you have a really disgruntled employee get on the social handles or get on their own handles and just go to town, which is something you never want. So just being really open and communicating with your employees, especially if there's a new brand book going out, making sure that goes on a little bit of a mini roadshow, and the folks who are sharing content have access to that. For measuring it and making sure I have sort of an eye on what people are sharing, we do use some internal tools to monitor. So we have some social listening dashboards set up in Sprout Social, which I'm a huge fan of their tooling. And then also for our employees who are really active and are really trying to make this part of their everyday job, we have set up shield accounts for some of them. So they can track their own personal metrics, which are really interested now and to see, as well as like what content is actually resonating with my audience. So like what pieces of content should I repurpose in a couple months? So yeah, those are the sort of the two things that we work on when we want to show like business value. The other thing I didn't mention, which is super important also for making sure that we're delivering on business values, is social orchestration. Understanding like if there is a big moment that we're trying to rally behind and we want to activate our employees, understanding like who's going to share what handles, whether it's executive handles or maybe it's an entire team is going to focus on this one individual to help boost the content. I do some social orchestration, which has been super impactful with some of our activations.
So how do you do that? What do you use a tool to use that, or do you just do that through email or?
Yep, we love to use our own tools. So we actually use Confluence to create a
Okay.
campaign and assign different tasks to individuals who will be like resharing or adding a comment. And yes, it can be very timely, which is why we usually only focus on this type of approach for those big milestone moments.
Okay, that makes sense. So generally, your people are free to talk about what they're interested in or what they're doing specifically, but it's these key
Mhm.
milestone moments. That
Yep.
makes a lot of sense. So I guess the next big challenge for for employees is once they've started sharing and they've understood what they could write about, what's their story, what's their angle on things, is sustaining this. And this is, a challenge for, I guess, all employee advocacy programs or creator programs. I mean, do you have any recommendations for fellow program managers on how to keep things going? I mean, how do you motivate people?
Yeah, I see we have run into this challenge a couple of times. So I think you mentioned earlier that I helped establish our creator program at Atlassian, which is very different than an advocacy program. That is, our creator program is made up of individuals who are active in our Atlassian community who are content creators. But I think there are a lot of similarities between an internal advocacy program and a creator program because the behaviors are very similar between those individual groups. Those groups are sharing content and creating content for their personal handles in mind. So, in order to incentivize them, one, having a point of contact that those two groups can go to. So usually a program manager, which I think is an absolute must for any brand who is wanting to invest in employee advocacy or in a creator program like our Atlassian creator program, because there are a lot of questions, especially with the platform's algorithms changing all the time. You want to have someone who's in a role who can help problem solve in real time, provide expertise, answer questions. Because if someone's just running into issues the entire time, they're not enjoying the fun of creating content, in which I love how you call it a happy employee advocacy program. Like, social is fun at the end of it. It should be fun because you're connecting with your network, you're sharing funny videos, you're creating goofy content, you're also talking about things you love. So you want to have someone there to help problem solve that and sort of break down those barriers. Also incentivize and recognize individuals who are creating amazing content, who are going over and beyond, who are maybe they're getting asked to speak at events. Like, all of those moments should be recognized by an employee advocacy program or a creator program. And also sending swag. I send swag all the time. I spend a lot of time at the UPS store, to be honest with you. I'm always sending something. I'm sending swag. I'm sending cakes for something. It's that, like, even though, yes, we all work a lot at large enterprises, that like thoughtfulness and like surprise and delight moment never goes away. So I do send a lot of swag. And then also internally, we will send kudos or like affirmations to folks just to show that we see what they're doing and we really appreciate it. And then testing is also just so important for it to sustain these programs, because as platforms are evolving and new platforms are rolling out, making sure that you're continuing to test new ideas, new concepts, and working with these types of creators to test that. Because if their content is falling flat and they don't understand why, it's probably time to pivot and try something new and see if that works. So yes, I feel like those are more like the three things to help sustain up of some type of program like this.
I mean, what I love about the way you're running the program, I think it's fantastic, is it feels so collaborative. It feels like right from the very start, you're working with people to understand them, and then you're problem solving and working on ideas with them, and then you're sending them kind of rewards and swag and stuff. I don't know. It just feels a really, really kind of together kind of experience. It feels really positive experience for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why I love these types of programs so much, because I feel like social went through this like weird time where brands were wanting to advertise on it. We were pushing so much marketing jargon and fluff into feeds, and people are like, hold on, we're actually a human. This isn't how we like to interact on these platforms," which is why you see employee advocacy programs and employees being the voice of the brand a lot, as well as you activating creators who might be in your community, because we're all people. We all just want to connect on these platforms and not be sold something. Just being able to hear and have that human connection is so important. And if your programs don't have that, then it's going to be really hard for them to succeed.
I love that perspective. I couldn't agree more. It's that human connection that's everything, isn't it? And that's
Hmm.
when they don't have that, it just doesn't work, does it?
Yeah. Yep.
So finally, Ogilvy released a report earlier this year saying that employee advocacy was their number one influencer marketing trend for 2024. I mean, do you think that this is the year that employee advocacy is going to finally go mainstream?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, all 110% believe that this is the year that it will go mainstream, with new platforms emerging and algorithms changing so much. It's really challenging for brands to keep up. So they need to lean into their employee advocates. And then also with all of the sponsored content that you see, it feeds now from influencers, it's hard to know who to trust sometimes. So their audiences are really questioning the credibility of some of these famous influencers, which I still have my favorite influencers and bloggers that I follow that I've followed for 10 years. I don't think that will ever change because I like knew them when they started really small, and then they've gotten their audiences have really just exploded. But for advocacy programs, I think brands will have to lean into their employee advocates to really help share their brand stories and product stories, because they just can't keep up right now. And it's so cluttered on some of the platforms, it's hard to know what to follow. So you want those employees out advocating for you and sharing with their audiences.
Absolutely, and as we said, building that human connection, which all this sponsored content just can't do in the same way, can it? What do you
Yeah, yeah.
what just very briefly? I mean, what do you think the impact AI will have on that trust factor?
That's a great question. It's I think AI, especially for I think it's great for content creation to build a foundation. I still think that you need to add your own personal voice and tone to things, but using AI to help an employee advocate or a creator come up with a ton of ideas, you always have writer's blocks. I think it's great to be like, I want to talk about this. I need a ton of different ideas. Using that for rapid ideation, I think is perfect. But I do think that AI, if it starts to become the tool to draft all content, we're going to see any type of creator lose credibility if they're just copying and pasting what's coming out of ChatGPT into their feeds.
It's couldn't agree more. It becomes very kind of beige, doesn't it? Everything becomes very samey, and there's no personality or again the kind of human angle in it. There's no
Yeah, part of me wonders like if eventually the platforms will have like they'll review all the content and be like, nope, this is not from because their engagement will decline. Their monthly active users will decline if they're not entertained. Like, if you're entertained when you're scrolling, you jump off the platform, and that's not what they want. So, part of me is like, is there going to be a world where they're actually going to review all the content quickly or have their own sort of checks and balances in place before you can publish something?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. Yeah, I don't
I
know.
have no idea. It's just, yeah, it's wild times with AI, but I do love it for like I use it all the time to help me draft copy, especially if it's like I'm just having that writer's block and I'm like, I don't even know what to say right now. It's been super helpful.
It's great. It's great for that, isn't it? I agree. It's sort of giving you outlines and thoughts and different perspectives. It's really handy for that, isn't it? No, I
Yeah.
agree with you there. Well, that's been absolutely fantastic, Kelly. That's so insightful. I've learned so much about you know how you've created this creator program. I think it's absolutely fascinating and again very impressive, to be honest, what you've managed to achieve at Atlassian. So thank you for sharing that with us. Really
Of
appreciate it.
course. Of
So
course.
finally,
Thank you so much.
no, it's great. It's great to have you on. So finally, where can people find you, and is there anything we can do to help you?
Oh, yeah. Follow me on LinkedIn. I am always sharing stuff that inspires me as well as things that I'm learning every day as I'm taking on the social platforms and trying things out. And then also I'm active on Instagram too. So if you want more lifestyle and just social content, you can follow me there, but LinkedIn is the place to find me. I'm on the platform all the time throughout the day.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Kaylee. Really lovely to see you, and see you again soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.